UConn's legacy continues to live on the big stage. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying the content, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow wherever you listen to audio versions, Apple, Spotify, all of the podcast places. It really helps the show grow, and I genuinely appreciate the support. Every follow, subscription, and download not only helps build our Locked On UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NIL initiatives with Store Central and Bleeding Blue for Good. And as of yesterday, we talked through this with Kevin Solomon. There's something I'm super excited about. We're donating 10% of all revenue to Husky Ticket Project. I'm proud to partner with them and help send kids to games and make a real difference in the community. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me and for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Let's get to the heart of the program. We are going to welcome in and bring back Emily Adams, beat reporter for the Hartford Courant, covering the women's basketball. Emily, let's get you on here. Where are you? There you are. You are a fantastic writer. I'm enjoying your work, and I have to tell you, I know you're covering the WNBA. And you're at the finals, going back and forth to these games. The UConn women's legacy and their legends are all over this finals. Can you speak to how kind of important it is that we have two of our greats playing on the biggest stage in that very same WNBA finals?
Yeah, it's really cool. And I think based on the research that I've done, I think it's really the first time that something like this has happened. I'm almost positive it's the first time that two UConn alums have met in the finals after both finishing top 5 in MVP voting. You look at like Diana Taurasi and Maya Moore met plenty of times in the playoffs, but never in the finals. Same thing with Sue and Diana. So this is a really, really unique experience. And especially because Stewie and Fee not only are both UConn alums, but they played together. They were both on UConn's last title team together. So it's a really full circle moment for both of them, I think. And especially having it be these two who are now business partners and are sort of founding their own league. I think it's a really cool full circle moment, not just for them, but for the program and for everybody who's kind of gotten to watch them grow up. And having it be in New York, I think is really cool too, because there's such a UConn, fan base there. So, you see like the old Stewie UConn jerseys and stuff out in the crowd at Barclays, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's been Barclays has been dubbed Store South like MSG has, but I think it's kind of adjacent, if you will, Store South adjacent. So that's pretty cool. How do you think having this alumni meet in the finals for the first time, great stat by the way, impacts the perception of kind of UConn going forward? We obviously know the legacy of UConn, but their future recruits. We've had a couple people on talking about international recruits that are coming to UConn potentially. Obviously it helps, but where do you think this goes with UConn, especially with Gino in his last contract as they kind of transition maybe to another coach in the future? It's just keeping this program strong, kind of having these women being in the WNBA finals, correct?
Yeah, I think, just having players see the level of pro development, that was something I saw when I was covering South Carolina too. They're second to UConn in alumni in the W. And it was a huge thing recruits always talked about there as well, is just, knowing that this is a place that's going to prepare you for the league. And I also think, especially with UConn, having that network of alumni in the league is so valuable once you get to that level. You've seen, like, I know we're going to talk about Paige Bueckers' world tour this summer, but, she's been around with a ton of current WNBA players, former WNBA players who, she has that connection to because of UConn, and who are preparing her to make that step next year already. And that's, if you're coming out of a program that doesn't have that kind of alumni network at that level, which, I mean, really there's about 3 schools that do, and it's UConn, South Carolina, and Notre Dame. And that's really it. So it's a really, really unique sort of win for UConn alums, I think, to come out and have that amount of support coming into the league.
Emily, I'm gonna. This wasn't something that we were going to talk about, but you brought it up, and having that alumni network. You said only 3 teams really do that. Why do you think that is? Do you think that, especially now with the height of women's basketball being where it is, probably at an all-time high as far as visibility, coverage, do you think there's more investment going to be made coming down the pike, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, I think it's a really, honestly, like a complex
Sure.
situation. I think some of it is like, for a long time, a lot of the talent just didn't have a lot of options. There were a few power programs and everybody else was kind of fighting for the scraps. So I think a lot of the top recruits, a lot of the elite talent coming out of high school was going to the same, 5, 6, 7 programs. So a lot of them have a lot of alumni still in the league. And you're seeing, Tennessee, hasn't obviously been on the level that they were back, in the Pat Summitt days. And so you've seen, they used to have a huge alumni network in the league, and that's sort of slowly dwindled, but still obviously a ton of Lady Vols are out there. And yeah, I think South Carolina has sort of established themselves as that new power, sort of filling that void. And you have more coaches who were former W players now. So I think the talent is more spread out, honestly, than it used to be. I think more programs know how to prepare players for the W. So I think it's definitely something that's going to start to change, especially in the NIL era, when you don't have the same concentrations of talent when you have the transfer portal. But yeah, and I think, having that base really helps. I think, being those programs that were there at the inception of the league, that were, prominent already and sending players to the league early on, it gives this next generation, I think, still a leg up in making that jump and in kind of finding a place in a league that's still super small. There's
Right.
just not a lot of players in the league. So there hasn't been a lot of room for that sort of second tier of talent who's really, really good, but not quite, the top upper echelon
Right.
of the league. And so I think as the league expands and more of those players get in, you won't see, the lopsided numbers that we have now. But I think the teams that sort of were foundational in sending players to the league are going to continue to be.
Absolutely. All right. When we return, we're going to turn our focus to the one, the only Paige Bueckers and her worldwide tour, otherwise known as for her as the worldwide tour of work. I'm probably getting that quote wrong, but we'll come back and talk about it with Emily Adams. Ever had a rough morning after a night out? ZBiotics has you covered. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed to help you feel better and have the best next day. When you drink, your body produces a toxic byproduct. ZBiotics tackles this by releasing an enzyme that breaks down this byproduct in the gut. I tried it myself the other night with some friends, felt great the next day, was able to do anything that I normally would have. And as you know, when you get older and you drink, a lot of times it takes a lot longer to recover. So totally was ready to take on my next day and in the morning. So make ZBiotics your first drink of the night, then drink responsibly. Don't go crazy. But if you do, ZBiotics has your back. So for 15% off your first order, head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege at checkout. It's backed by 100% money back guarantee. So you have nothing to lose. Give it a try. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just don't follow my bets because they haven't been great lately. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place the first $5 bet as a new customer. That's $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Check it out to get started. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with Emily Adams, beat reporter for the Hartford Courant. All right, Emily, we just got a good taste of UConn in the WNBA, and we're going to talk about probably the #1 draft pick in the NBA draft, WNBA draft next season. I did talk about the last time about she may have some competition there with the Juju Watkins and others, but I think it's pretty consensus that as of now, Paige will be the number one pick in the draft next season. She had this incredible, summer tour, right? And am I getting this quote right, where she essentially said it's the people called it the worldwide tour, but they didn't see the worldwide work? Is that correct?
Yeah, the work tour, everybody saw the world tour, not the work tour, I
Gotcha.
think was
Yep.
the exact quote. But yeah, it was a pretty good line from Paige out of the gate.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. What do you think about Paige's preparation and mindset coming into this season? Like, if I don't know if you've asked her this, but it's kind of a different season. She's the first fully healthy offseason since high school. Do you think some of that freedom from her rehab has impacted her approach and mindset for the season?
Yeah, I think it definitely has. And I think, that was something she talked about a little bit with kind of going on the world tour was, she's been sort of trapped, either in Connecticut or wherever she's doing her rehab for the last couple of years, just like working with doctors, working in kind of one place. And so this summer was her first opportunity to like be a real person and like travel
Right.
around and get to take advantage of these opportunities that she's been given for the first time. And so I think that's such an important thing, especially coming off of the season that they had last year that was so, I mean, just like mentally and physically trying on everybody. I think she really needed that, just sort of, not that it was a break, but she just needed to like have a life outside of basketball for a little bit. And I think that's going to be so valuable for her coming back in this year. But yeah, she was seeing trainers pretty much everywhere she was. She's been kind of bopping around to assorted NBA, WNBA trainers all over the country. So I have no doubt that she is going to come in as prepared as she's ever been, and she looks it. You can see even in her
Yeah.
upper body, like she's clearly put muscle mass on. I know she talked about weight training was a big part of her off-season training, just trying to build strength. So yeah, I think we're gonna see a new version of Paige Bueckers this year.
All right. I love it. Gino has mentioned that he wants her to be more aggressive. What do you think that looks like? I think because for me, for a player like Paige, she's obviously a great scorer. She's a phenomenal shooter, but she has a flair for playmaking. So like, what's that going to look like for her? Is that really just about her scoring? Like, how would you kind of decipher that if you're listening to Geno Auriemma and asking her to be more aggressive?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. It's something she talked about in her availability the other day, that last year she felt like she bought too much into the post player role. She was playing out of position pretty much all season as a 4. And she was feeling like, she was grabbing rebounds and outletting it to a guard instead of going, oh, I'm a guard and I can, take this myself and do something with it. And frankly, because I'm Paige Bueckers, it's probably going to be more successful than, whoever I'm going to outlet this to. So I think it really, like, it's more a mindset thing for her and an understanding of like, she is the star of this team. She is the best player on this team, bar none. And she has to act like it. She has to demand the ball. She has to demand possession. She has to, be in control of the game at all times. And it's something she's more than capable of doing. I think we saw her really turn it on during the NCAA tournament. That was sort of the first time I felt like
Sure.
she really got, aggressive and was really hunting her own shot and hunting her own opportunities. And I think she can be aggressive as a passer too. But I think, for Gino and for her, it's about not looking for the pass and not looking for an extra pass and not looking to give someone else an opportunity, but prioritizing her own chances and her own scoring opportunities, knowing that that's going to be the best chance for the ball to go in the net.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. But sometimes I think it's hard when you're innately a great teammate and you're always trying to put your teammates in better positions. I think you see some of that, with LeBron James in the NBA, right? One of the greatest players of all time. But how many people have wanted him to be more of a killer, right? Be more like Kobe, that kind of stuff. So I wonder how Paige will change, if at all. So we'll see. What about the media pressure? with Paige. She's obviously the most visible athlete at UConn. I think you could argue she's the most visible athlete at UConn, men or women. And how does she navigate that constant scrutiny? Like, what's her approach with dealing with media? I think she handles it well from the things that I see, but you're in the mix of it. What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think for her, the nice thing, she's been really impressive with media to me since she was a kid, honestly. I mean, since she was in high school. And I think that helps. She has been so prominent in, the basketball world since she was, 15, 16 years old. So this is sort of old habit for her at this point. I feel like she's so familiar with the attention and familiar with the pressure and familiar with the criticism that comes from that level of exposure. And obviously it's sort of taking it to another level this year. But she's someone who I really like. When she says she doesn't care what other people think of her, I believe her. And I don't feel like that's true for everybody, but I really do think that, the pressure on her this year is 99% coming from herself. Like, I think she takes this idea of winning championships at UConn incredibly seriously. And she has since she committed. And I think it's going to be a really big deal to her personally, regardless of any of the noise, if she doesn't leave UConn with a title. And so I think that's where the pressure is coming from, of knowing that this is the last chance to kind of get what she came for.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Last question on Paige, and then we're going to get to supporting cast and others in the last segment here. Gino has hinted that Paige may see the ball more in her hands more often. How do you think that's going to impact her, but other players too? Because they brought in Caitlin Chen. She can handle the rock. There's others that obviously can. So I'm curious, like, do you see her in that point forward, point guard type situation most of the season, facilitating and looking for her own shot? Or do you think they're going to mix it up with her off the ball as well?
Yeah, I really hope she's on the ball a lot more this year. I mean, in her heart, Paige is a point guard, and that is where she thrives. And, even whether it's, finding her own shot or whether it's creating for other people, like it's just where she's the most effective to me. And so I think having somebody like Caitlin, who is also an elite passer, but really can shoot. Like Caitlin's a really, really elite scorer. She can get downhill. And UConn is not a stranger to running that sort of multiple point guard system. Obviously started 2 point guards with KK and Nika most of last year. And then you also had Paige in the mix. And I think that's something that they, that trio started to really figure out towards the end of the year. So I think if they can sort of build that chemistry and figure out a flow and a rotation of sort of who's running the floor when, I think they can be really, really dangerous. Because I mean, having multiple ball handlers, we've seen this. I cover the Connecticut Sun, and that's something that they've really thrived with this year. Is they've got Alyssa Thomas, who's one of the best passing forwards maybe ever, and it's just such an additional weapon to have. And at the college level, I think there's very few teams who are capable of effectively defending that if it's running well.
Well said. All right, let's take a quick break and pay some bills so I can keep my job, and then we're going to come back and talk about Ice Brady, KK Arnold, Ashlyn Shade, Azzi Fudd, amongst more, and we'll come back right after this. Have you heard of Robinhood Gold? It is a fantastic product. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society folks. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash. You receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and you're rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product specifications, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. UConn fans, my favorite sponsor, Homefield. It's getting us ready to elevate our game, whether we're going to the game or just hanging out at home. Homefield just dropped the new Heartland Campus Classic pullovers. I just got myself one. It's probably being shipped as we speak, and they're perfect for showing off that Husky pride. These pullovers combine a comfort with vintage-inspired designs. Kind of reminds me of Starter Jacket, in that you'll absolutely be looking and feeling great over, whether you're at the game or watching from home. And you know what? Honestly, the best part, obviously, is you can score 15% off with your order with my code UConn24 at checkout. Just head to homefieldapparel.com, grab your favorite new gear, and use promo code UConn24 for 15% off. Don't miss out on this fresh drop. It is fantastic. You guys have to check it out. I'm sure some of you already have. If you're getting these pullovers, use that promo code. It's a must-have for any true UConn fan. Just kidding. We're not going to play that again. We got to get you in some home field gear, Emily. This is a home field sweatshirt right here that I'm wearing. I'm telling you, I had you muted on that response. I screwed up that promo.
I don't think I have any UConn gear yet, so I might need to invest.
I think if I sent a message to my rep at Homefield, we could probably get that squared away.
Okay,
for help,
pick you up on that.
for helping us out at Locked On UConn and being a weekly guest. I think that's definitely warranted. And I'll be honest with you, my wife got a kick out of it when she was literally in giving labor, in the hospital in labor. I was waiting, and I looked at my clothes, and I was like, I'm in all Homefield gear. And she was just like, it's comfortable. And we were, we didn't know how long it was going to be. So I did like a promo from the hospital. That's how much I love the gear. But anyway, so Homefield, you get a nice little extra promo there. I'm excited about the potential for a supporting cast with Paige. And I know coaches hate that because obviously every player plays a role. And Gino doesn't shy away from obviously talking about Paige being the star. But I think, and I always love it when I talk to people who are like, there are roles for everybody. There's no such thing as a role player because that's everyone plays a role, right? But I think I have a few favorites on this team, and this is no disrespect to anybody on the team. Ice Brady for obvious reasons because I love her name, and I think she's an incredibly hard worker. KK Arnold, Ashlyn Shade, and we're going to get to Azzi Fudd. But those three in particular, give me your prospects for what you think they need to do to make another level jump for next season.
Yeah, I think for all three of those guys, it's what their role is going to look like is a very big question mark right now. Especially just fundamentally with the injuries and stuff of who's playing where to start the season. But I think, Gino has talked a lot about, Ice came back really, really in shape over the summer, put in a lot of really good work. And I think for her, she's competing, I think, for that 4 spot with Sarah Strong, all most likely. But we did see them take a couple of reps running a lineup with her at the 5, and with Sarah at the 5 a little bit during practice the other day. So some center reps could be fun for Ice as well. But yeah, I think she really showed, I think, what she's capable of at the Big East tournament last year. That was sort of her breakthrough moment. And then we didn't see as much of that during the NCAA tournament. But I think it's easy to forget with her, like she was a redshirt freshman last year. That was her first year playing college basketball, even though she'd been on campus for a year. She was also just coming off of blowing out her Achilles, which is a really, really, really hard injury to come back from. Like one of the most difficult recovery processes. That's the same thing Geno Auriemma is coming off of. And so I think, for her, a lot of it probably is too having a healthy offseason, being able to actually train and work on her game and have an understanding of what the college game demands of her and what UConn is going to need from her this year. So I'm really optimistic about just kind of her ability to be a real impact player for them this year. And with KK and Ashlyn, I kind of think they're in a similar place, just because they played so many more minutes than they and anyone else expected them to last year. They've all been open about that. Like no one was prepared for them to have to start pretty much every game the whole season. But they did. They really, I think that forced them to mature really quickly into kind of the players that UConn needed them to be. So I think it gives them a head start coming into year 2, of, they're sort of in the opposite place of all these guys who had to redshirt, of they're way more experienced than they should be at this point. So I think it even if they're not, in the starting lineup the way they were last year, if they're not playing the same volume of minutes as they were last year, I think the challenge for the two of them is to be as impactful as they were, even if they have sort of a smaller role in terms of actual workload. I think, like, for Ashlyn, it's going to be becoming more consistent as a shooter. She had really big breakthrough games last year, but just kind of getting, being that consistent knockdown threat, I think is going to be huge for her. And same thing for KK, just kind of working on like point guard stuff, working on her off ball work, because she's going to be off ball a lot in a lineup that includes Chen and Paige Bueckers. So I think for both of them, they have a really good understanding of just sort of how different this year might look for them. And Gino has talked about, for them, he wants to see them sort of take ownership of that and take ownership of what their role is going to look like, and sort of demand his attention and demand minutes and force him to kind of play them.
Yeah, Gino, the master manipulator there. I love that. He said to come and demand minutes. I love it. You mentioned Geno Auriemma. We'll get to her in a second, and Chen also. But I really wanted to get to Azzi, and she's obviously undeniable talent, but she's had injuries, just like Paige has. How do you think, or do you think that Gino is going to implore any kind of load management with her in terms of how they ease her in? I know she's not 100% right now, but as the season goes on, what's that going to look like? Do you think that they're going to ease her in, almost like, to use a baseball term, like a pitch count? I'm curious what your thoughts are on what you heard.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see a minutes restriction for her early on. I mean, just because coming back in to playing after you've sat out for as long as she has, and really, she hasn't played like a long, consistent stretch of competitive 5-on-5 basketball since she's been in college.
Right.
Her freshman year, she had a pretty good stretch there, but her sophomore year was kind of punctuated. She was in and out a lot. So I think it's in the interest of for her, because it's been that same knee so many times. It was that knee her sophomore year, and then it was kind of that knee that was already destabilized that then resulted in the ACL and the meniscus tear last year. So I think you just have to be like as careful as humanly possible with her. She has to be bubble wrapped until you need her. And so it really wouldn't surprise me if we don't see her much at all during non-conference play.
Okay.
Before like Christmas time. I think I'm sure we'll probably start to see her like as we get into like later November, early December potentially. But I would not expect her to be playing full minutes very much at all during this early part of the year, just because I think she tore the ACL in mid-November last year, so she's just about at the year mark once the season starts. And the year mark is sort of a tentative one. The meniscus slows everything down. So I think, in the interest of having her, because you want to have her in the tournament, that's when it matters, and you want to have her for Tennessee and for South Carolina in February. And so I think, if they can preserve her as much as possible through the Farley Dickinsons and the Boston universities, I mean, there's just no reason to push her when that she, that knee is just not 100%. And it's not, that's not worth that risk to me.
I love that FDU and BU just caught some strays, but that's okay. I totally understand what you mean. That's totally fair. I did a entire show about Chen, and also multiple segments on Geno Auriemma. I think with her in particular, we talked about Jana, super high expectations, even coming off of an injury. Is that fair right now? Is that fair for her to have those expectations coming off an injury?
Yeah, it's tough with Jana. I mean, she's had such an odd situation since she got to UConn. She's been on campus for 2 years basically without playing a single game.
Yeah.
Which I imagine, for us, it's like, okay, what's going on? But I cannot imagine how frustrating that is as a player to just kind of have to practice and do nothing else for so long. And that's something Gino talked about with her and with Ayanna Patterson as well, is that
Sure,
they're almost a little bit too anxious to get back. They get frustrated when they can't be where they want to be and they can't, be going at 100%, full speed, exactly where they were before. But I think with Jana, she has the benefit of having been on campus for 2 years and having kind of gotten her body, ready to compete at the college level. I think, she's been around, the Aaliyah Edwardses and, even like the Olivia Nelson-Odotas before that, just kind of absorbing these other, UConn stars that have come through. And so I think she's in a place where she can live up to those expectations. Like, I don't think they're unrealistic. They might be a little unfair. But I think they're definitely like within the realm of possibility for her. I think it's just kind of going to be a question of how fully healthy is she? How fully fit is she when it comes down to actually, playing the volume of minutes that they're going to need from her.
Yeah, I think it's a little unfair if when in particular, like when I do a show on her or a segment and she's mentioned, flooded with comments like, oh my God, she's going to be, 20 and 10. And, and it's just like the potential's there. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, 6'5", runs like a deer is fantastic in transition. Like, I think there's, she can stretch the floor with her shooting. Like it's also a really difficult premise to come in, like you said, not having played in so much time. And also the demands of being a post player for Geno Auriemma are very difficult. So I think we should temper it a little bit as people who kind of cover this on a daily basis. So that's the reason why I brought it up. Do you think that's fair for me to have that tempered approach?
I think that's true for all the injured guys. I think even when you get the reaction of like, AZ's not back at practice yet. And everyone's like, oh my God, why isn't Az back at practice? It's
right.
Well, she's less than a year removed from having surgery on her ACL. It's going to be a little while. And the start of the season, I think for UConn fans is going to be a very big exercise in patience. It's
Sure.
probably going to look ugly at first. Like, a lot of these players have not played together, have not played substantial minutes together on a consistent basis. So I think everybody is going to have some growing pains early on. And I think that is not a reason to panic.
Sure. I'll my last question on this, I'll switch gears to another player who I think is going to be fantastic for us is Caitlin Chen. I think of all the players coming in, she may actually, again, new system, totally get it, but she may actually be the most impactful player early on because of her experience, her ability to handle the ball, but also, as you mentioned, being off the ball and can shoot, her defense, coming from a winning program, I think she could be what UConn needs kind of to hold water, if you will, or tread water. What do you think about that? Do you think that that's fair, or do you think that I'm a little off base? I'm curious. I think she might be what the team is missing to start the year.
Yeah, it's, I think you look at her, obviously she's not sort of a one-to-one replacement for Nika Mule.
Right.
You're not going to get that. But what Caitlin has that Nika didn't is the scoring. And that is so huge. You look at, this is a good defensive team. UConn is a good defensive team. Have a lot of like fundamentally solid defenders. Paige is an excellent defender. And I think they really, at some points last year, they just needed a scorer. They needed points on the board. And Caitlin gives you that 100% of the time. Caitlin is going to get you points if you need them. And so I think, the dynamic with her and Paige, and even with KK too, I think is going to be really like interesting to see kind of how that differs from the way that she played with Nika. I think they have a potential to be really, really dangerous, just sort of as a backcourt duo. And then you obviously, when you throw, some of these elite shooters, you put like Az into the mix, you put,
Right.
If Shade takes another step with her three, I think they're a really, really dangerous guard group. And I think the experience is huge with Caitlin. This really is a very young team outside. It's a very old and a very young team. Everybody
It's kind of weird.
Extremely experienced or not at all. And so I think having somebody like that who has been through not the sort of UConn experience of the last few years, but who has had like a very traditional, led a lower level team to NCAA tournaments, won Ivy League tournaments. She's been through kind of the steady grind of a college season. And the last few years have been so weird for UConn. And I feel like they just need that sort of presence of stability and like calm in the storm.
For sure. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's going to be her role. Listen, Emily, fantastic show. Really appreciate you. Have some fun covering the WNBA Finals. Really, I don't really have a rooting interest because there's two players that I follow that are on the side. So it was a great game last night. So I'm sure you're going to get more of that. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. For Emily Adams, I'm Mark Zanetto, asking you to stay locked in, stay locked on, and stay connected. Remember, it's not just about getting it done. It's about doing it in a way that it can't be done any better. That's our goal every day. Go Huskies.